Good evening. We'd like to call to order our SEAC meeting for Thursday, April 21st, 2022. We'll start with our land acknowledgement. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississauga of Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, learn, and live. I'll follow it with the DDSB's Human Rights and Equity Statement. The Durham District School Board is committed to learning environments that are safe, welcoming, respectful, equitable, accessible, inclusive, and free from discrimination while placing human rights and equity at the center. I'd like to move on to our roll call, starting with welcoming our guests. We have Renee Ruddock, the Clinical Director from Lake Ridge Community Support Services, Andrea Simpson, Clinical Manager from Lake Ridge Community Support Services, Wanda Harrington, Senior Clinical Manager, Grandview Children's Center, Allison Warren, Instructional Facilitator, and Danielle DeKnight, Principal at DDSB at Home. And we'll start then with the roll call, beginning with myself, Association for Bright Children and SEAC Chair. Moving on to Autism Ontario.
Sensor Renee Burrell, present.
Okay, Black Parent Support Group. I don't think we have anybody online yet. Durham Down Syndrome Association.
Hi, Tara Cully.
Early Years Consortium. Okay,
Vera Mercier.
Oh, okay. Nice to see you. Mm-hmm. Easter Seals Ontario. Don't have anybody yet on for Easter Seals. Learning Disabilities Association of Durham Region. Don't believe we have anybody online yet from the Learning Disabilities Association. Member at Large, Carolyn? You're muted, Carolyn. No. Okay, Carolyn McLennan, member at large, is on but having audio difficulties. Member at large, Donna. Okay, Donna Edgebean is not online as of yet. Ontario Association for Families of Children with Communication Disorders. I don't believe anybody's online yet. Voice for Deaf and Hard of Hearing Children. I also don't think we have anybody on yet. The trustees, can you introduce yourselves?
Trustee Donna Edwards for Ward 3, Town of Ajax.
Hi, everyone. It's Linda Stone, and I'm trustee for Oshawa.
Okay. And staff, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Andrea McCauley, Superintendent for Inclusive Student Services, and Eva just flagging that Chris has joined us.
Oh, yes, I saw that. Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Carissa. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Carissa Lewis. I'm with the Black Parent Autism Group.
Thank you.
Okay. I can jump in. Kyla McKee, System Lead for Inclusive Student Services.
Okay.
Connor Jenkinson, another System Lead for Inclusive Student Services.
Okay.
And Michelle Crawford-Eade, another System Lead for Inclusive Student Services.
Okay, thank you. Elementary School Admin Representatives?
Rima Sati, Vice Principal at Crothers Creek Public School.
Okay.
My apologies, Rima. Tammy Rayner, Principal at Sherwood, and I apologize, my camera doesn't seem to be working right now.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Secondary School Admin Representatives?
Not this evening, Eva. Not yet.
Not this evening? Okay, great. I think is there anybody that I've missed? No? Okay, wonderful. We will move on then to the approval of the agenda. Can we get a motion to approve the agenda if everybody's happy with it as it stands? Donna, seconders, Tara, all in favor? Okay, agenda approved. Moving on to the approvals of the minutes for March 10th, 2022. Has everybody online had a chance to review those minutes? And if you have, do you have any questions or concerns with respect to those? No? If we have no questions or concerns, can we get a motion to approve the minutes? Tara, seconders? Carolyn, all in favor? Okay, motion passed. Moving on then to staff reports, starting with the administration report.
Thank you so much. And so we know that student well-being, mental health, and learning are all intertwined. So we're really appreciative of the fact that spring has come alive most days in our schoolyards. And so our schoolyards and our cafeterias are filled with kids connecting and laughing, which is great. A vibrancy in our schools that April has not brought for a couple of years. So it's really fantastic that our kids and our staffs are together in buildings, which is fantastic. We are looking forward to May 2nd through 8th with Children's Mental Health Week. And we continue with the theme of hope in challenging times. Carrying that forward from last year is very appropriate to how we continue to move through and support each other. That week will culminate in Shine Green Friday. And we're also the information in the PowerPoint shared with you around the collaboration between our mental health leader and our student trustees in putting together opportunities for our secondary students. The Ministry of Education has released funding for the 22-23 school year, and the link to the publicly available information was provided in the information. We just want to provide a couple highlights. So there's some key documents for those that are new around the SEAC table. Education funding can be quite complex, and the special education and mental health envelopes are certainly not benign to that complexity, as there's a number of different formulas, buckets of base funding that comes to us, as well as special education specific funding, and then what we refer to as partnerships and priorities funds, which are enveloped money. So the information that has come out is a bit of each of that. And so the 22-23 technical paper is what guides boards in just what it says. The technical or the finite details behind the intention of funding for the overall district in our sector, all education. The ministry annually publishes a specific guide to special education funding. Again, it can be quite complex with a number of different components. And the guide is generally a thorough overview just of those different amounts that come into all boards in that. This year, the mental health funding looks a little bit different, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then there are key separate documents because we have a couple of processes that are applications-based for our districts in submitting for funds. And two of those are listed. One is special equipment allocation. So we receive an allocation both base and then per pupil, but we do submissions against that funding to draw back into the board. And then the special incidents portion, which allows us to apply for funding for our students that have 2 or more board supports for the majority of their day, and is a portion of the staffing costs, and we'll talk about that in a second. So a couple of these areas are seeing changes for the 22-23 school year, which we thought were important to bring forward tonight. Next slide, please, Kai. Thanks. So again, for those new to funding, the grants for student needs form the base of all funding across the district and brings that in. In the last few years, we've had benefit of additional funding called Supports for Students, and their partnerships with our local union groups in terms of augmenting support for our kids. In the past couple of years, we've used this to bump up both elementary CERT, EAs across the district, and then DDSB at home special education classes. And again, that's in collaborative conversation with our union partners. Some of the supports for students funding is continuing, not quite at the level it was prior, but honoring that we are going into collective bargaining in the months ahead with the collective agreements expiring August 31st. So we are grateful for continuity of at least a portion of that funding. Previously, the mental health and well-being funding was one of those special envelopes. So we consider that one-time funding and very exclusive to the school year. This year, within the technical paper, the ministry did announce that the mental health and well-being bundle moved into the grants for student needs. And that's where we kind of see it as a bit of a pilot project when it's a PPF or a partnership fund. And when it moves into the GSN, it's got some stability to it. And that has implications for us for staffing because it becomes more stable long-term dollars in terms of how we drive service for students. So again, we see that as a positive, as well as a new well-being and positive school climates allocation that you can see there is a base amount of $10,000 per district plus a $1.14 per pupil amount. Again, for those new to board funding, a lot of the funds are driven by a base amount that all 72 school boards would receive equitable across the province, the exact same, not equitable, equal in that case. And then the per pupil amount is what differentiates us. And being in that kind of top 10 size boards, that per pupil amount is really important to us because we're doing the multiple on almost 74,000 students across the district. So that comes into us that way. When we come back into special education specific funding, Kai, if you don't mind, thank you. We talked about a couple bundles of funding. And so one is our special education, special equipment amount. And this is the fund that drives both some of the software, computers for our kids with special education strengths and needs, as well as the OTPT related recommendations for equipment for students to access educational programs. And you can see there that there was a slight shift in the base amount that the board will receive. Again, when we multiply that over 74,000 student population, it is not insignificant in terms of that amount that we look at around that. You can also see that we are returning to a submission basis for SIP. So that is where we apply for grants against the staffing for our students that have 2 or more board supports with them. So again, when you take a salary and benefits costing of 2 or more board supports, you can tell that just under 29,000 is a percentage of the costing towards the supports for the student, but does augment that. For the last 2 years, there's been a calculated amount to boards. And this fall, we will be returning to a grant submission and writing the SIP claims that will be due in December. We do pre-plan for how many. So the EA allocation team, which forms the basis of the majority of the support reference within our SIP claims, is currently going through the process of next year staffing. Through that process, as those are student-based decisions, we do track where additional supports are going and then take a look at that based on student timetables in the fall and do the submission. So a projection on the SIP claims is embedded within the board budget that is forward to trustees for approval. And so we do an estimate. And so when we hit our grants in the fall, it is actually for money already spent. So it's a claim back for what has already been built into the budget. And that's why it does not increase FTE or our staffing amounts, full-time equivalent, because it's already built in that the kids start the year with that support in place. And we go from there. And the last one that I just want to highlight for funding is our Educational Community Partnership Program. So ECPP, formerly, these were our care, treatment, custody, and corrections. We saw the renaming last summer to Education Community Partnership Programs. In Durham, we call this under the umbrella of Grove School so that the kids are participatory within a school culture. Traditionally, because Grove runs on a 100% funded through grants, that each program is a grant submission that is put in annually and then updated through the year. Historically, to this point, including the school year that we're standing in, those grants were all recreated from a scratch template each year as the templates became updated, and a lot of staff hours in terms of moving data with some repetition. So the Grove team and I are quite excited that the ministry has announced an auto-populated renewal. And so it's just program expansions that we would be really looking at, that intensive amount of work. And the auto-populated will be a verification of information and any updates. So we're quite appreciative because anytime we can be efficient in processes, it turns time back to kids and service in connection with them. And then thanks, Kai. I think we're good on that. So just a couple of other updates for you. So the Inclusive Student Services Leadership Team is currently working through revision of the special education plan. And that plan will come to SEAC in May for input and feedback prior to us taking it to our Board of Trustees during June standing. And this gets us ahead of the July submission date to the ministry. In addition to meeting the ministry requirement, the plans will also be based on the principles, objectives, and requirements of our Indigenous education policy and the currently draft human rights, anti-discrimination, and anti-racism policy and procedures. Our goal is always to articulate a plan reflective of the programs and services for the 22-23 school year and the district's continued and ongoing learning and evolution as we actively demonstrate our commitment to addressing ableism, upholding Indigenous rights, human rights and equity in our programs, services, and learning environments. And so our team's really been in a lot of conversation around how do we articulate what the programs look like in their current planning for September, but also give that indication of how our teams are learning and growing and reflecting on programs, services, resources, tools to change those. And so mainly the plan is aimed to meet our duty bearer responsibilities under that draft human rights policy as we look at promoting and protecting human rights to identify, prevent, and address discriminatory barriers, embedding inclusive design, universal design, and looking at accessibility in both our programs and our learning environments, and also how we correct incidents of discrimination. For some of our practices, we do know that some of the tools have those layers within them and practices, and we're really taking a look at how we do, what we do with, and how we, right in front of that, connect with families authentically and center their voice and identity in service. And as always, we'll continue to build forward on the accessibility of the plan itself. We do consider it an important community-facing document, identifying our commitments to student learning and well-being for those with special education strengths and needs. So we're always looking at both the content in terms of the language, the volume, and taking a look at that. So all of this work is informed by the principles of intersectionality, dignity, respect, individualization, participation, integration, and again, with that commitment to taking a look at systemic ableism as well within our sector. So our commitment is to always be listening, learning, and shifting our practices, grounded in our individual and organizational duties, responsibilities, and accountabilities to our kids and the communities we serve. So we're just taking a look at that. We're currently planning as well summer programs and transitions with some funding coming in for both of those items. So we'll be bringing that forward in May SEAC. And we're also excited about some funding that has been delivered through different partners, such as Smart Start Hubs that are funded through the ministry, MCCSS, that look at early and coordinated access for developmental services. So we're looking forward to seeing where our partners such as Grandview Kids, who are joining us later tonight for the OAP, will look at how that works and being a partner in that, and we'll be bringing that to awareness and consultation to SEAC. You have a really important voice in how we shape partnership service, so we look forward to bringing that forward. And then just noting that this continues to be a challenging school year for our students, staff, and families, but that we center that on the commitment to our kids and the joy that they bring to learning and how they inspire us. So that is our administrator report. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Andrea. Does anybody have any questions for Andrea with respect to the administrator's report? No? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Okay, then we'll move on. Thank you very much, Andrea. That was great. We'll move on then to Donna for the board report.
Yeah, thank you. And as I want to thank actually Tara for presenting at the finance committee issues, concerns, and from SEAC. It's much appreciated. And it's interesting because even though the GSNs, as Andrea has said in the technical report, we keep on getting memos. There was one that was released just yesterday that I kind of have some questions around, especially around mental health supports as far as that, as well as the first release of the GSNs. They actually had a predicted of a decrease in enrollment for our board. Eventually it does catch up because we do the submission of enrollment numbers basically twice a year, and it does eventually in the end get fixed up, but it's we're usually basing our budget on our projections and not necessarily what the ministry is projecting, because they are showing a slight decline in enrollment in our area. So it's always an interesting time going through the budget and trying to, as said, it's the details that kind of catches us sometimes when they keep on sending out these memos as clarification of, which is interesting. Anyway, so just what the board's been up to is that, of course, Donald, we had a boundary review, which is always difficult to do, around French immersion and regular programming for Donald A. Wilson, and we proved the option one of that. You have to go into the report because I'm not going to go which school went to what, but we did a boundary review in order to deal with capacity enrollment issues at Donald A. Wilson. The bell time review, again, that was put together through Durham Student Transportation Services, and we were provided with 3 options. However, really there was only one option for the board to approve in the end, because one of the options basically would cost us money that we don't have, and the other option was status quo, which meant that very much possibility of not having the ability to bus students to schools because of the shortage of bus drivers. So we did do the bell time review and consultation. It went through a consultation and really a second consultation for some secondary schools to see preferences of times. But we did approve option one again of that. So the bell times are there. They did the best they could as far as ensuring that we bus all our students and accommodate what they could, keeping in mind that a lot of the busing is tiered. I know in Ajax, most of it, there's tiering. It's done. Most of it is 3-tiered in Ajax for sure. As well as it's a note of a motion for our human rights policy, as well as the revised safe and respectful workplace and harassment prevention policy came to board. And that is really all that was done on the business point of the board. Next month is going to be extremely busy with finance reports, those policies coming forward as well. And that's my report.
Thank you, Donna. Does anybody have any questions for Donna with respect to the board's report?
May I ask a question, Vera, here?
Sure.
You said, Donna, there's a board boundary review and Donald A. Wilson. Is that one? I have had families who are asking questions about the French immersion being eliminated in kindergarten next year. And is Donald A. Wilson will be a one track or is it two tracks?
Andrea was going to respond to Donald A. Wilson as a high school, but it has to. I know that one of the things that we have done, just before you speak there, is that previously, as far as French immersion, any single track elementary school that had, we eliminated kindergarten from a single track French immersion school. And that actually started this year, wasn't it? In some schools, for sure. So anyways, Andrea, go ahead.
It's okay. Thank you so much. Through you. So Vera, I think two different panels. So the boundary review for Donald A. Wilson was supported to alleviate pressures of secondary enrollment. So it creates where there will be two high schools in Whitby hosting the French immersion program, both with their own boundaries. So the trustees approved that grade 8s from Robert Munch and holding at Ormiston, instead of going to Wilson, will be going to Anderson, as will their peers who are currently in grade 9 but residing in those same areas will be going over. And that those two school communities for the English track side will come to Sinclair, just to alleviate that enrollment pressure. And Superintendent Lazarus has been doing a lot of planning with her team to make sure around course integrity and working with both principals on transitions, as well as staffing to make sure around course selection, as the French immersion program will then build up into the 11 and 12s as those students move forward in the next couple of years. Your question about Julie Payette, you are correct. It is a single track French immersion school, and we have a number through the district. Planning into this year, again, with the approval of the trustees, this is usually up to this year, inclusive of the 21-22 school year. Each single track French immersion school had 2 kindergarten classes. But as a French immersion school, they do not carry an English track boundary. And so for September, this coming September, they become a 1 to 8 French immersion only sites across the district. And the kids would be in their home elementary schools based on the English track boundaries for those 2 early years, foundational years. So a little bit of a shift, again, around enrollment pressures and really building really robust kindergarten programs as we look at the growth of French immersion across the district. Right now, we do not cap the program, so we try and build responsive to family choice and voice. And we are seeing a growth of the program across the district. And our planning team, together with the trustees, continue to watch and monitor how that's impactful for enrollment across the district.
So, and thank you for the explanation. So just so I'm clear on the message that I'll be redirecting people to the parents, to the board, but just so I understand, for example, Michael Jean Public School, which is a French immersion who has offered immersion from kindergarten, will no longer be existing as of September, and it will be, what happened to those kids that are currently or will be going into the kindergarten classroom? What information?
If you don't mind, Eva, is that okay? And actually, Connor was one of the administrators at Michael Jean in his previous tours through schools as well. So that's why our trustees approved a plan that gave advance warning to community so that we would have those transition points in readiness. So parents have been aware of that as they register for September because it was something communicated out during the previous last year. We lived with a transition this year, and next year starts the new, so that we wanted to give families time because although schools like Michael Jean did some exposure for kids in early years, the early years program is exclusively in English as an English program, with the French immersion program officially starting in grade 1. So there would be really no change in terms of the foundation curriculum, although we do appreciate that some of the schools were giving exposure to language, just fostering that love of learning as well. Connor,
go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. No. I just didn't know if that was fulsome enough around inquiry you had around Michael Jean, or if we want to tap into Connor's previous experience as vice principal in that building.
Hi, Connor. Connor and I started there. I ran a program out of that program with Bonnie and Connor. So again, it's just it's for us to be clear, so I give the right information. I know my supervisors and a lot of people have been asking a lot of those same questions. So they will have a kindergarten program. It just would not be French. It will be strictly English until grade 1. Correct?
I'm glad you asked for clarification. So the French immersion only schools will start at grade 1 and have no kindergarten programs on site. The kids would transition and begin in the building for grade 1. The dual track, where there are English and French programs running, such as Cataraqui, would offer kindergarten because it's within their English track boundary.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to explain that to me.
No, thank you for the questions, because if you're asking, so are other people. So thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions with respect to the board report? No? Okay, so we will move on then to the Inclusive Student Services Department report.
Thanks so much, Eva. As part of our department report, we have a special couple of guests that you introduced earlier. So to begin our department report this evening, pleased to introduce 2 educators that support our gifted program, Danielle Denike, who has been the principal of DDSB at Home grade 7-8 campus for the past 2 years, and she's responsible for all of our virtual gifted classes. She's joined by Allison Warren, who's our special education instructional facilitator for the gifted program, and they're here to share with us some information and experiences around this program delivered through a virtual platform. So over to you, Danielle and Allison.
Thanks so much, Kyla, and good evening, everybody, and thank you for having me. As Kyla shared, my name is Danielle Denike, and I'm the proud principal of the virtual gifted stream. DDSB at Home Elementary is home to approximately 70 students with a gifted exceptionality in a self-contained classroom. As some of you may know, these classes hosted for grades 4 to 8 have teachers with special education additional qualifications to deliver programming that adds depth and breadth to the Ontario curriculum. As shared by Andrea this evening, we are listening, learning, and shifting, and tonight we would like to share global connections and lessons learned in the gifted stream as we transition back to a fully in-person program. Next slide, please. And I apologize, I'm delayed on my end. Students with a gifted exceptionality have strengths in areas of need as articulated by the Ministry of Education. DDSB at Home gifted stream students have benefited from virtual programming to heighten student strengths while also addressing areas of need. First off, gifted stream students develop unique and unorthodox ways to solve problems. Breakout rooms are just amazing, and this setting has allowed students to work in small groups without being influenced by other peer groups. There has been a dynamic shifted from in-person to virtual when in breakout rooms. When teaching in person, groups would eavesdrop on each other to try and get some ideas and compare themselves to one another. This may hinder individual and creative thinking. But by putting our students into breakout rooms where they cannot possibly hear what other groups are thinking, it allows them to think outside of the box. They can come up with their own unique, unorthodox ideas. It also allows those really quiet and shy students to have a voice in the conversation. The last 2 years, teachers have had students who they also knew from brick and mortar who barely ever spoke up. When they are in breakout rooms and even in the whole class meet, they regularly participate using the chat and sometimes turning on their microphones. The meets and breakout rooms are also beneficial because it allows for students to try different peer groups based on interest and abilities. Another strength of our gifted stream students is that they have many diverse interests and hobbies. Student voice was honored in the virtual campus throughout the last 2 years, where students created their own clubs and extracurriculars based on their interests. Some of the clubs included craft club, art club, chess club, music club, coding club, animal club, one of my favorites, and games club. And another strength is that students can simultaneously attend to several tasks and thoughts with ease and purpose. Virtual classrooms offer the innate opportunity to multitask. Students are attending their classes synchronously, virtually investigating or researching in a separate tab, conversing with classmates in a breakout room, and applying their learning in an app where a teacher can view their progress in real time. There isn't any physical switch of desks or positions, so teachers can easily change up the groups each period of the day. It also helps with independence because students have the choice when working on an assignment to stay in the main meet or join either a help meet or a social meet. The social meet is set up so that students can chat while working on their assignments. And there's been many opportunities where teachers have gone to the social meets to see them discussing the assignment they are working on, and they are presenting and sharing their screens, walking through the math problems that are being presented in class, explaining and scaffolding step by step what they did. And this helps their peers to understand the concepts further and sometimes allows for opportunities to try new strategies. They also like to challenge one another quite often with their ideas and will often debate over questions such as in subjects like geography, history, social studies, and science. When teaching in person, it isn't always beneficial to place students with their friends, but when you're using breakout rooms, this allows students to work with their friends who share the common interest and or abilities without compromising the integrity of the lesson or disrupting the rest of the class while they work. A fourth strength that we wanted to highlight this evening is how they are independent workers and that they require very little external motivation. So in our virtual school, we have morning entry and announcements. And as students come into class, we do our usual greetings and have small talk discussions. And as teachers are waiting for the rest of the students to join, there usually is at least one student who starts talking or questioning about something that is happening in the world. So a few examples that the teachers had offered was that there was a class discussion on a plane crash that had occurred in China. They did discuss the occurrence that happened at the Oscars, and they will even bring up social justice events that have occurred throughout Ontario. There are times these discussions are generated by the students themselves before the announcements, and then there's other occasions where after the announcements, because of what the administrators have shared as thinking points, the discussions expand beyond in the actual lessons. Compared to in person, teachers have noticed that students are more involved and willing to discuss when in a virtual setting. They will use the chat, they will come on the microphone, and they are almost always on camera during those discussions. And it could be a little bit easier for them to discuss those serious issues when they don't feel that they're actually being watched by someone. Teachers have noticed great improvements and noticed that they are more involved virtually than in person. Next slide, please. 2 seconds to catch up. So for addressing the areas of need, some of those include to be challenged with learning materials and resources at a more advanced level, to learn skills and concepts at a faster pace and with less drill and repetition, to focus more on themes and problems than facts and information, to work with intellectual peers who share interests and abilities, to develop creative and innovative products that are more than a restatement of existing materials. In one of the gifted stream classrooms, there is an extra credit inquiry assignment that's available to students. These are not predetermined projects, but rather ones that students come up with on their own. The teacher offers examples of what they could do just to get ideas generated. Students interested in completing these will conference with the teacher, using their flex time as a time to come together and conference with the teacher, and develop a plan with goals. Throughout the course of the term, the teacher and the students do check-ins and talk about progress. They talk about what subjects they'll be incorporating into it, what they can do to push themselves further, check to see if work is accurate, thoroughly communicated, deepening their understanding of the subject as well. And they submit their final project and assignment at the end of the term, and they have the option to share their inquiry project to the class as well. Some examples of what students did in a grade 4 to 5 class completed last year. We had photography portfolios, piano and vocal coverage of Taylor Swift songs, coding games and simulations, art portfolios, and written narratives. Examples of what students have done in grade 7 and 8 classes include elements of the periodic table for pure substances that's connected to their unit in science. One student did further research on some elements and is learning how to construct Bohr-Rutherford models. And most of this was done independently. The students have conference with the teachers just to make sure that what they have done and written has made sense. They gather feedback and they check to see if the diagrams are accurate. Some students are working on art portfolios, experimenting with different mediums. A group of students are collaborating to create animated short films, not exactly independent, but they are working together. But they are the ones who created the project. They write their own scripts, they design logos, they design the animation, they do the sound effects and voices, they create previews, and they do the editing. Another student has created lesson plans and informative presentations for visual arts and music based on their own interest from their home country. This has been tried in person in the gifted stream as well, with not a high engagement success, but in virtual, the number has drastically increased. Grade 4 to 5 classes, we've had 15 out of 25 students submit inquiry projects. And this year in our grade 7 and 8s, we've had 10 out of 18 students already conference with their teachers about projects. I'm now going to turn it over to Allison Moore.
Thanks, Danielle. Good evening, everyone. My name is Allison Warren. I'm the current facilitator for gifted programming at the board. In addition to all the amazing things that are happening at the virtual campus, this year we have also launched a new site specifically for families of elementary students who are currently enrolled in the self-contained gifted class. Through conversations last year with caregivers of children in the elementary self-contained gifted program, it became clear there was a need for capacity building with families around the objectives of the gifted program, especially for our newly identified gifted students. There was a need for resources, transparency, and capacity building between host schools and opportunities to develop a love of learning in our gifted students using non-competitive formats. The creation of this website was developed from these valuable conversations. The site launched this past September and continues to evolve by adding new sections and migrating current content to be AODA compliant. The site currently consists of a family resource section containing informative videos and articles for families of gifted learners. There's a facilitator of gifted programs page where facilitator contact information is readily available to families, and bi-monthly messages focusing on growth mindset and mindfulness are presented and discussed by the facilitator. There's a page for each host school to display the many unique and interesting activities that are going on in their gifted program, just like the ones we heard tonight. And in addition, there is a regional events section where dates, teams, photos, and results of board competitions can be posted. The Rise to the Challenge section was initially created in September of 2020, offering virtual events for students to participate in lieu of our annual regional competitions, which were put on hold due to health and safety protocols. It was created last year and consists of a series of non-competitive challenges teachers can use in their class or students can do in their free time. These challenges are created, posted on the site, and emailed out to classroom teachers by the facilitator. They are open-ended and easily adaptable to any subject area. Students can submit their work to have it posted on the site and viewed by all of those with access to the community. Although these challenges started last year in response to health and safety protocols, they have now become a valuable addition to the program, allowing all students the opportunity to participate in events without winning always being the goal. It has also built capacity with gifted teachers by providing them with new programming ideas and lessons. Our newest section is the Student Spotlight. This was added just last month and highlights the many great things our students are doing outside of the classroom. This section spotlights a different student each month, focusing on their extracurricular interests. Currently, this section features a grade 4 student from the Coronation program who is a self-published author on Amazon. Not only is she passionate about writing, but she's open to sharing her knowledge with others, providing free e-copies of her book, and has offered to lead talks about her writing process with other gifted schools and classes through online meets. This site originally developed from a need for alternative methods to communicate and collaborate during the pandemic that has quickly grown into a community where families, students and schools can learn from one another. It has been a well-received resource for the elementary gifted community.
Thanks, Eva. And before we carry on with the report, just wanted to pause if there were any questions for Danielle and Allison.
Anna, I see your hand up.
I was just wondering, because you mentioned that the site was created particularly around for our self-contained gifted. I'm just wondering if any of those resources are available also for any parent who has their child who's been identified as gifted and who's in a regular class.
This site was made specifically for the self-contained families. However, all of the information is available if CERTs or families of gifted students in mainstream classes do have questions or are looking for resources. They're definitely available for them.
How are they made aware of that, though?
It's usually through the CERT. If they're talking to the CERT looking for different programming ideas, and then they would contact me. I also have created a classroom for CERTs and teachers of mainstream, of gifted students that are staying in mainstream, where a lot of these resources are included as well. So teachers get access to that classroom, and then they're able to share them with the families.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions for Danielle or Allison with respect to their presentation? Okay, if there's no other questions, I have one. Is there any way that the members of SEAC could see the website? I know I'm curious as to, and I'm kind of excited about that whole idea. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, if you want, I can post the link in the chat. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, I'll do that. Just give me a minute.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. All right.
Eva, may I just say thank you to Allison
Yes.
and Danielle. When we moved into the first phase of the pandemic, both of these educational leaders jumped to be able to figure out what programming looked like for the kids. A lot of connection and time communicating with parents and really centering on the students. And in addition to that, as we built the program in the virtual campus, a lot of the educators were new to classroom. And so that meant a lot of strategy training alongside what that meant for learners who are gifted. And then just grateful to have Michelle back in coordinating, helping us take that look at elementary to secondary, mainstream, and within the program as well. So just wanted to thank all of them for both the presentation tonight, but all of the work represented behind it, and the success and joy for the kids that have their needs met in that way.
And Eva, I've just posted the site in the comments right now for you.
And Eva, we can also get the link and put it in the minutes.
That would be fantastic. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you both, Allison and Danielle, for your presentation. It's nice to hear what's happening with the gifted, at home and in person, because I think we've all kind of been a little disconnected in that respect for the last couple of years. So that's great for the update. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
And just to continue on with our department report, I'm just going to highlight a couple other slides. You have the full slide deck, but just to point out a couple of pieces. The learning preference survey data gave us another opportunity to connect with our families and learn a little bit more about what's working or not working for them in those virtual small classes. The system lead, so Michelle, Connor, and I were able to, or made every effort to connect with any of the parents or guardians of students who are currently accessing virtual classes or who had indicated virtual for next year, just to learn a little bit more about what was working for them and what challenges. And in many ways, it provided us a great opportunity to hear a little bit more and offer some suggestions, strategies, and solutions. And so in some cases, we even had students decide to return back to their in-person learning ahead of schedule or ahead of the fall and change their learning preference, feeling quite comfortable once we explain some of those moving parts. So as you know, those in-person spots were left open and remained open throughout the year for any students who felt that they could return to the bricks and mortar opportunities. And so that is our current plan for next year as well, is to keep those seats open so that as things continue to shift and change across the landscape through COVID, we want to make sure that there is that opportunity to reconnect with their program and staff that are in the bricks and mortar as well. And then just jumping to this slide to talk a little bit more. I think we've talked a few times about our Life Beyond High School events. We've had a number of them this year as Braden and Sade continue the important work of supporting our families in exploring pathways beyond high school. So our most recent one was the post-secondary education, and we had representatives from Durham College and Fleming be there and able to share a little bit more about the CICE program, which is an incredible opportunity at the college level for a supported co-op experience to provide students with that work experience that we hope would help them support a plan to a world of work. And then they were also able to explain a little bit more about the access to support centers, which is an important knowledge for any family to have, but it, I think, alleviates a little bit of the anxiety and stress about students moving on to post-secondary and not really knowing what's available to them. Our last and upcoming opportunity is called Community Connections. And so the details are not yet up for this final session, but as soon as we have them, we will of course share them with SEAC and they will be part of our social media campaign. But the intent there will be for another opportunity for students and their parents or caregivers to explore community services. And so we know that the more they can build relationships with the community agencies, it helps them to better connect to what is out there. Just to highlight to this slide, so our department and of course the entire board have been engaged in deepening our understanding of Indigenous rights and human rights. And this ongoing work is resulting in a tremendous reflection about the resources we have developed and will develop in the future, the processes we have in place, and the importance of now reviewing any that may not reflect the Indigenous education policy, the human rights, anti-discrimination and anti-racism draft policy, the inclusive design and accommodation procedure, or the human rights responsibilities and accountability framework. So we anticipate reviewing and adjusting a number of our resources based on this new and important learning with a specific lens to anti-ableism, intersectionality, and accountability. We've highlighted this one for you as it is one of our resources that's shared quite widely in terms of understanding some of the pieces, resources, personnel available in the Durham District School Board. And so it's one that we will begin in terms of that revisit and review. And then just wanting to highlight finally the scholarships, bursaries, and awards for graduating students, and the continuous reach out to SEAC members and community agencies to share this information with their community so that we know that the information about them is widely spread. We do have social media campaigns that share this information, but we also know that speaking to trusted community members is also a key way of sharing this information. And of course, we have the highlight of our Learning Disabilities of Durham Region, who has partnered with us to provide a specific a scholarship award for a student with a diagnosed learning disability that's continuing to study. So again, those details are in your package, but just wanted to highlight a few of them and provide a little bit more information about them at this time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll move on to questions. I see that Vera Mercer has her hand up for a question with respect to the report. Go ahead.
May I ask what the acronym means with CICE with Fleming and Durham College?
It's community. Community Integrated Cooperative Education. And so it provides the opportunity for job coaching and support embedded in work experience. So it's like a co-op education program that a secondary student might participate in, but it has the design of some additional supports and job coaching to be able to provide that support as they gain the skills and independence within a co-op experience or a work experience.
And how does students get access to that program?
Great question, Vera. There is an application process to it, and there are a limited number of seats each year, but it's an ongoing opportunity. And so, as an example, within our board, we have the Transition to Work program, and so we offer that opportunity in an earlier 18 and over to get some of those skills started and those opportunities started. And so we do have some of our students who are from Transition to Work and may head into the CICE program, but it is an application process. And if you, that link to the recorded presentation will have direct information about that application process, who you can speak to, and we certainly can connect you with Braden and Sade. They are our transition coordinator team who has every piece of information that would support a family in that application process, and they work with families supporting them through those steps.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Okay. I just wanted to circle back, flipping through the report itself. I noticed there's a slide here on the Children's Mental Health Week from May 8th or 2nd to 8th. Is this something that students or families can sign up for?
So I'll take that one. Steph Pellebor is our lead through that. And in general, the students are signing up by classroom, as most of those are secondary speakers for youth. And so we're hoping our secondary and our secondary classroom teachers are enrolling. We're just watching that. And one of the presentations is grades 7 to 12. I can get links through Stephanie if SEAC members want to log on. Most of the resources are through a toolkit so that teachers can pick activities in real time embedding within their program throughout the week or between now and the end of the year as well. We're using the week to highlight the resources, but certainly have created them as a foundation of just well-being and social emotional learning in the context of the curriculum in classrooms. But if there are members interested, I can get the links from Stephanie and circulate those.
Yeah, I would appreciate it. That's great. It just taking a quick look, it looked like a great week. So I just wanted to sort of highlight that.
Sean was with us last year and quite well received by the students. Charmaine is someone we work quite closely with, both in terms of employees. She also runs some of the affinity spaces for her own clinical staff as we work through some of the changes. And then Asante is new to us this year.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. If there's no more questions, then with respect to the Inclusive Student Services Department report, we will move on to our presentation regarding the Ontario Autism Program Entry to School, being presented by the Lake Ridge Community Support Services and Grandview Children's Center. Okay.
Should I share my screen with the presentation, or do you have the presentation?
I do have it in a PDF format. It's up to you. If you'd rather share your screen, that's fine too, or I have it in PDF.
It might be easier for me just to share it, if that's okay. I can.
And just thank you to our guests for joining us. We appreciate the partnerships both with Grandview Kids, Lake Ridge, as well as resources. And so just thank you for responding to the request from SEAC for more information about the Entry to School program.
Can everyone see? Perfect. Okay, so thank you for joining us. I guess I'll get us started. I'll introduce who I have with me today. My name is Andrea Simpson. I am one of the clinical managers overseeing one of the most of the sites at the Entry to School program. We also have Wanda with us. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Wanda Harrington. I'm a senior clinical manager at Grandview for the early years programs. A speech pathologist by background, but I've been the early years OEP programs are part of my portfolio, in addition to preschool speech and language program and preschool OT and PT services.
Hi, and I'm Renee Ruddick. I'm a clinical director at Lake Ridge Community Support Services, and I'll be overseeing the Entry to School program. It's in my portfolio with some other autism children and youth services.
Okay, so today's presentation is a collaborative effort of the Ontario Autism Program, so the partnership, so the OAPD as we refer to it. So members of this partnership include Grandview Kids, Lake Ridge Community Support Services, Resources for Exceptional Children and Youth Durham Region, the Regional Municipality of Durham, so Durham Behavior Management Services and Infant and Child Development Program. So together we have more than 50 years of experience delivering evidence-based family-centered services to children on the autism spectrum. And our mission is to provide high-quality programs and services to children and youth with ASD and their families in Durham Region. So children registered in the OAP and are between the ages of 3 and 6 are eligible for this program if they're attending JK, SK, or grade 1 for the first time in the fall. So there's some specific eligibility scenarios that the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services has shared with providers to help families select which OAP programs they wish to participate. So families must receive an invitation letter from the ministry to be able to register. And then families who receive the letter can call the service navigation team at Grandview Kids to register in the program, or they can contact through the email that's listed on the slide as well. So we've aimed to create an ETS program that addresses the goals and outcomes identified in the MCCSS program guidelines for this program. So some of the goals of the program include to support young children on the autism spectrum to successfully transition to school, to facilitate children's skill development and school readiness skills across 6 key domains, such as communication, play, social interaction, functional routines, behavioral self-management, and and pre-academics, and support their transition into kindergarten, to support increased capacity building for both providers and educators to help meet the children's needs, to build families' confidence in the capacity of schools and interdisciplinary teams to meet children's needs, to increase families' understanding what supports can be offered within the school environment, and to empower parents to be active participants in their children's teams supporting the transition to school, to foster strong connections between the home and the school environment through establishing open two-way communication regarding the children's transition process.
Okay, I'll take over the rest of the presentation. Everybody can hear me, right? Sorry, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
sorry, I can't see you because I have the presentation on. Okay, so when we think about entry to school, we can kind of think about it in 2 phases or components. The first phase is the 6-month skill building group that takes place in several school classrooms across the Durham region. We have actually 8 classrooms kind of spread throughout Durham. And then the second phase, or the second component of the program, is the transition to school supports, which takes place during the first 6 months that the child is in school. And I'll kind of go over each of the components in a little bit more detail. So the getting ready for school, the first 6 months, is intended to be a half-day program, 5 days a week for up to 6 months. So most of the children are attending either in a five mornings a week or 5 afternoons in the week. Some have opted to attend less than that. So we accepted families' requests to have their child attend either 2 days, 3 days, 4 days a week, just because of some other commitments that the child might have or some barriers around childcare. So we do have a few children who are attending less than the 5 days a week. The group really is intended to focus on 6 skill building areas, and those include communication, play, social interaction, functional routines, behavior self-management, and pre-academic skills such as listening, attention, and learning. The entry to school curriculum is really intended to reflect the play and inquiry-based approach incorporated in kindergarten programs and other learning environments. As much as possible, we're really aiming to create a program that familiarizes the child with the kindergarten environment and building their comfort with the rules and expectations of school. The other goal of the program is to really explore trial strategies and techniques and other supports that can be incorporated to build the child's success so that these can ultimately be shared with their home school at transition time. So this slide just outlines the kind of the entry to school team that we've created. The group facilitators are the ones primarily implementing the program in the group, in the classrooms. So we have a ratio of 3 children to 1 group facilitator. So the maximum number of children in any classroom is 9. And so we are able to maintain that ratio of 3 children to 1 group facilitator. The group facilitators are employees of Lake Ridge Community Support Services, and they have kind of backgrounds in a variety of areas, including applied behavior analysis, early childhood development, as well as experience supporting children with autism. And in addition to the staff leading the day-to-day group programming, we have a multidisciplinary consultation team who will also regularly visit each classroom. The consultation team consists of behavior consultant, speech-language pathologist, which may or may not include a communicative disorders assistant, depending on the classroom, an occupational therapist, as well as a transition coordinator. And the consultants will have a number of roles, including completing observations, conducting screenings and assessments if they're required, providing resources, liaisoning with other clinicians who are involved with the child. So at Grandview, most of the children in the program are still in the preschool speech and language program. So the consultants will liaise with those clinicians, as well as if an occupational therapist at Grandview is involved. And really, they're looking to kind of trial the strategies and then model and coach the group facilitators in the use of these strategies to enhance the program and meet the individual needs of each child who's in attendance. The transition, I should mention that the transition coordinator is also involved in the classroom. They're primarily spending time in the classroom to get to know the children to support that transition period as well. And so the next 6 months is the transition to school period. And with the family's consent, the entry to school consultation team will provide supports to the family and the school in the first 6 months following school entry. And really the transition coordinator is the lead for this work in that second 6-month period. And I should mention that the transition coordinators are employees of Resources for Exceptional Children. Unfortunately, they couldn't be here tonight, so I'm kind of covering their piece. So I'm doing the best I can in terms of their roles. But this is kind of how we created the role as part of the consultation team. So the transition coordinator is going to be involved throughout the child's entry to school experience. And it looks a little bit different in the first 6 months versus the transition period, the last 6 months. During the first 6 months of the entry to school, I mentioned the transition coordinator will be visiting the center-based program regularly to really get to know the child and gather relevant information to support that transition to school period. They may also work closely with the family to help support their registering in their child in school. Many of the children were already registered at the time that their parents enrolled in entry to school, but some hadn't yet registered, but they had intention to attend school in September. And so our transition coordinators are helping them through that process, completing the registration packages and any other required documentation in terms of gathering reports to share with the school. They're also helping the parents understand the education system and strategies for successful transition and information that's been learned from the center-based program. So the transition coordinator is really the primary source of contact between the school, the family, and the entry to school team. And that point of contact really continues in the second phase of the program when the child's actually transitioned to school. So they will kind of they will link the school team with the relevant member of the consultation team, depending on what the needs are identified by the school. If need be, they'll facilitate meetings between the entry to school team, the family, and the school team. They'll focus on identifying those strategies and techniques that were identified in the child's 6-month enrollment in the group-based program to help the schools identify how they can be incorporated in the classroom environment. And I've just created a separate slide that just summarizes again some of the transition supports. Really, this is our first year, and we know that we're going to have a lot of learning that takes place in terms of our experiences running the group as well as supporting the transition. We're really approaching this kind of in a way that we're asking the schools to guide us through the process. So identifying what supports they specifically are looking for. And of course, it will vary depending on the needs of the child and the family as well. So some of the things that might be included in transition supports have already mentioned. So it could be supporting the family, completing any documentation required to complete the registration process. With the family's consent, we'll also share a summary of the child's progress in the skill areas that are addressed by the entry to school. And so, as I mentioned, there are 6 domains that were intended by MCCSS to be addressed in the Getting Ready for School group-based program. Those include communication, social interaction, play, behavior, self-management, functional routines, and those pre-academic skills like learning and attention, listening and attention. The team will share the strategies and techniques that they found effective in supporting the child's participation in the entry to school program and problem solve and with the school and how they can be adapted or incorporated in the classroom. They'll also share any resources that they may have developed to support the child's participation in the group. So one example would be if we were using some type of augmentative system, some low-tech system like a PEX binder or a Pixon board that could follow the child into school if that's helpful to the school. We'll also attend any meetings at the request of the school or the family. We would be available to provide any specific education or training on topics that support the child's transition to the school environment. So depending on kind of the needs of the classroom staff and the child, it might be a presentation on addressing sensory needs or on incorporating some type of augmentative communication in the classroom. But really we're taking our lead from the school in terms of what they feel is required, as well as what the individual needs of the child are. And we're really asking for feedback from schools, how we can best support them, as well as the process of our first year unfolds, identifying what was helpful and what additional supports they would have liked to see in that situation. And I just included this last slide with the link to our Grandview website, that the page for entry to school. There's a summary. It's a good place to send families if they're not sure about the program. It's a good start. They're also invited to contact our service navigation team, and I think that email and phone number was on one of the earlier slides in the presentation. If families want to talk to a service navigator and learn a little bit more about the program the entry school program, as well as any other OAP programs that are supported by the Durham partnership. Sure, if there's any questions or comments, I put my email there as well. If any questions come up in the future, feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to answer the questions or direct you to someone who has the answers.
Great. Thank you so much. That was a great presentation. I really appreciate that. Tara, I see you've had your hand up for a question.
Thanks, Eva. I actually have two. I guess, but I don't think they're directed to our presenters. How does this dovetail into the START program that we had previously, the autism resource team? Like, does this whole process now, because OAP's kind of blown everything up, does this dovetail in? Does this replace it? How does that all function? And I guess the secondary part of that says that this program is really targeted and focusing on sort of like early entry, with our resources for exceptional children and our Grandview. So there's sort of an age cap at that. What are we doing with our children that are entering school who are kind of beyond that phase? Like, what's being addressed there, and do we have anything at this point? Yeah, thanks.
Eva, through you, if that's okay. So Tara, thank you. So I'll lean into a couple spaces, and then team members can tap in. So the ministries are trying to do things differently, right? In terms of, we see the start of what we've been asking for around SEAC tables and in districts and across sectors around integrating and centering on kids and families. And that's where you start to see the partnerships come together. We did see a bit of a shift a couple of years ago in terms of how, like, the infant and child development program fits into all of this, and who transitions to who, and where services lie. So we're grateful for the program that focuses on that transition to school. I'll just clarify a little bit that START is very distinct and different. So for us, the START team is short-term assistance response. Kyla currently leads that. And that's where we're sending EAs in to collaborate on modeling strategies. And that can be K to our kids in 21. So that just becomes a part, but they do often intersect with the work of the autism resource team, which is where I think you have them tied together. And when the acronyms overlap with all the edu terms, I can totally see how you would immediately go there. And the work does largely overlap in terms of who they're supporting, with the autism resource team helping collaborate on strategies, and then START coming in and helping implement them alongside schools. So we're all learning this. So we've seen a few announcements, Smart Start hubs, anchor in the CTCs as well, and Grandview is our local child treatment center. So we'll be learning more about that in terms of access early and integrated service. We had the draft of PPM 81 that's kind of quiet in the background, that also changes how we all work together. So we'll be bringing lots of information as we all figure it out between our organizations. Again, these are 3 organizations that the board is quite proud of partnerships with. School-based rehab, Lakeridge is one of our EC, like our growth partners as well. Like, we've got many partnerships that integrate our work. And so we see these as abilities to extend, but really at the core of it, we all need to turn to the families and the kids, right? What are their goals? How do they influence and help shape the programmings that best suit kids? And then how do we all honestly come from a service perspective rather than a student fitting into program? How does program fit student and family? And all authentically trying to make that shift. But we're learning. Sorry, I lost your last question. But we're literally building all of these programs currently, and then how they all go together is a bit of a puzzle that we're all trying to figure out.
Yeah, no, and the question wasn't meant as any disrespect to what was happening. This is fantastic, because I know we've been for months going, what's going on? We have no data. We have no programming. We have nothing. So that's the fact that we actually have something is fantastic.
And where Sensitive Reneb was really great to say, hey, can we get who's running this here? And I think that answered one of the questions too, because when we heard the announcement on this program, and it's going to be a 12-month program, but the kids are entering in the 6 months prior to school start. and we know that there's traditionally one intake into kindergarten, we were all wondering what would happen with that other 6 months, knowing that our partners would need to staff 12 months. And so I was grateful to see that kind of overlap in service, which we certainly have with infant and child development too. We tag in early and they stay a bit later, so that we can do a wrap around for families over transition points. And then for kids, we meet the kids where they are and meet with families. So at any point where a student is entering the system from either private or another district, it's around getting to know the student, what their goals are, what their voice is, what families wish, both in terms of short-term and long-term goals. We have room to grow, definitely, in terms of authentically listening and then listening behind the listening in terms of that. And I think certainly a couple of the policies, one past, one coming, anchor in that how we foster relationships in order to really authentically listen and hear and then respond. So that would be from our youngest to our oldest. But we are quite focused, on the K-2, knowing that positive school start is so critical for our kids. So we're looking at how do we tip, and Superintendent Hamid and Stacy are looking at a lot of programs of how can we tip with our community partners early, pre that kindergarten start, and then how do we maintain engagement post school start so that all the expertise are coming together. But really at the core of it is family wishes for child, and then how do we all hear that and respond in a positive way to support.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, and I think, Andrea, thank you so much, and thank you for the wonderful presentation. Andrea just sort of answered the question that I had, because some of the feedback that we, in terms of the Black student, Black parent autism group, some of the questions that had come through to me were parents or families who had received the invitation, whose kids were actually not eligible, because I think one of the requirements was that they were just, I guess, entering kindergarten for the first time this coming September. So due to that ineligibility, if you want to call it that, what are the other supports that would be available to them? But and I guess maybe going through directly to Lakeridge or Grandview, or just working with the schools directly. I guess those would be the alternative options.
Yeah, I can answer kind of both parts of that. I think what caused a lot of angst in this first iteration is that the letters were sent out to families of children born in 2016, 2017, 2018, because they all technically could access this program if they weren't already in school. But unfortunately, many of the children were already in school, and parents received the letter, and it was quite, I think, distressing for a lot of families to get the letter and see this, what we're hoping is a wonderful program, but that they couldn't access. There has been, and I only got this information a couple of days ago, so I actually printed out the section of the website for CANARC, Autism Services, because they have kind of extended their Connections for Students program as a one of the sub-programs of the OAP is Foundational Family Services, and it's available free of charge to all families registered in the Ontario Autism Program. And so the Connections for Students has been expanded for children who don't qualify for entry to school, but who's still might need some transition to school support. So that they actually have a referral form right on their website that families can self-refer, or other agencies, school board can support the registration. It's a very quick, brief registration or referral form, and they're fairly right now. I guess their caseload is small, so they're responding fairly quickly. So that would be available to any child with an OAP number, and it has nothing to do with kind of starting school for the first time. It could be any kind of transition in school. It could be transitioning to high school, or transitioning to a new school or, any type of transition within the school setting.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's great.
Thank you so much. Donna, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, and you kind of touched on it, Andrew. And again, thank you for the presentation. It was actually quite clear and it has a better understanding as far as, where people go and exactly how it works. So I much appreciate that. But it was more of, because as we heard, the Smart Start Hub is where we would like to see things go a little bit. And this program is sort of like, if I wish, is sort of the start of that process and expanding that to others. And I know I haven't heard anything else. Has there been any discussions around the Smart Start Hub at all with our community partners and how that might look?
That's actually launched. Our service navigators are just starting some of the training on the About My Child tool and some of the other tools. But that's not part of my portfolio, but certainly the guidelines have been circulated and the work has started. As you were asking the question, I was thinking you might even want to invite one or two of the team to this forum for a presentation if you want a little bit more information about it. But it's officially launched, but in terms of sitting at Grandview, but there's still work to be done in terms of getting the people up and running to be ready for the program.
And just following up on that, the different organizations have not yet been invited to come together. So Wanda, if you don't mind taking that back, we'd be more than happy to come to the table and are looking for that invitation when it comes through. Sure. Just in understanding that reciprocity within the guidelines, there are two-way communication partners identified as well as one-way referral paths. Yes. And we are looking as a district to be more actively engaged than a one-way referral pathway, and to be a reciprocal partner in terms of figuring out service plans. So if you don't mind sharing that with the other team, and then when able, very much welcome, I think, Eva, to come and share that information at our SEAC table as well. The members around the table are incredible at giving consultation and feedback. Very wise to the families supported. So it's a great space, as well as your, just as you have your parent advisory council, the organizations that sit around this table can be a valuable partner and input where there's partnerships as well.
Yes, I will second that. We would very much welcome them to join us and provide us with a presentation because the information is so valuable to our families. Okay. Do we have any other questions with respect to the presentation on OAP? No? Thank you very much, ladies. We really, really appreciate you coming and joining us tonight and sharing that information. It's really valuable, and it allows us to answer questions to our parents who are asking us from across different associations. So thank you very much. I appreciate that.
My pleasure. Have a good night.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you.
Bye. Okay, so just before we move on, I just want to sort of acknowledge, just for the minutes, we did receive regrets from Rowan Jarvis for the Learning Disabilities Association for tonight. And in the meantime, Elizabeth Daniels from the Ontario Association for Families of Children with Communication Disorders has been able to join us, as well as Anthony Phelan, our secondary school administration representative. Is there anybody else that I missed that maybe I missed on roll call that was able to join us just after? Okay, great, thank you. We will move on then to the open discussion period. We have a couple of items in this section to sort of talk about, and I think the first one we want to talk about is returning to in-person meetings. One of the things that I have noticed, and I know there's other people who've noticed this as well, is that the communication flows very freely in person. We tend to, for those new members of SEAC, in person, we tend to break out when we're doing consultations on some, things that board sort of priorities, things that have come, like, for example, the human rights policies and procedures. We'd normally break out into groups and we'd have discussions on those and then come back to sort of the main table and share those thoughts that we had in those individual discussions. The problem with an online format and streaming to YouTube is that we can't go into breakout rooms because those breakout rooms would no longer be public. And that would be a violation of the regulation around SEAC. But, and I know many people over the last year have developed Zoom fatigue. But we've noticed that, sort of consultation wise, the really important discussions that we have around the table are sort of lacking in the same way in the virtual format. And with everything opening up, capacity limits being lifted, sort of everywhere, graduations back on, grad socials. I think board has gone in person as well, or at least in a virtual format or a hybrid format. Unfortunately, with SEAC, we don't have the ability to do that just yet. We do have an obligation under the regulation to provide a public gallery, which we do in person. We have a gallery. We are still trying to figure out how we keep that accessibility piece of at least adding a recording on YouTube following the meeting. But we don't currently have the ability to have that in place for this year. We're hoping maybe we can figure something out for next year. That extra accessibility piece would definitely be nice, especially given the forum. But I have my biggest concern around the sort of the quality and the depth of the consultation that we provide and the sort of advice we provide to the board on these very sort of important topics. So I sort of want to open it up to that discussion about returning in May to an in-person forum at the board, as we've done in the past. It also allows for the networking amongst the associations. That's something that the new members of the SEAC wouldn't also know. There's sort of those informal discussions that happen sort of before and after meetings that are really great for just associations that have intersectionalities to have sort of those discussions on, what's your association doing and what are your thoughts on this and that kind of thing that we don't have in a virtual format, and just building those relationships, especially with new members. So those sort of my thoughts, but I want to, open it up to the floor to see what the thoughts of the rest, the other SEAC members are on the return to in-person. Okay. Sorry, Caroline, I see your hand is up. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now? Okay. I would actually welcome maybe a return to in-person just for some of the reasons that you mentioned. I'm not sure if, I guess we always have the gallery and people coming to sort of be present, so not online, but obviously in the room. Are there limitations on the number of people that can participate like this?
Andrea, I don't know if you want to jump in on this, but I don't think there are.
Not by public health standards. And when board returned to a hybrid, it's really around staffing and space that we were able to do that in terms of supporting that. The gallery is not there. It is not a public space for board, but we do have the ability to stream the board meeting. It's just that as a district, we don't have the staffing capacity to support additional hybrid. So I would have to get an answer on the gallery. Traditionally, pre-COVID, we were, I think, between probably our average around 15 in the gallery on top max, I think, Kai? Yeah.
Yeah, like my recollection is there was generally at least 4 or 5 that regularly attended, and occasionally you would get a few others, especially if there were teachers doing their spec ed 2.
Part 1. Oh, 2.
Or
Yeah.
part 1. Yeah.
For sure.
Who would also be there. But for the most part, I would say 15 is being very generous, but usually in around 5 in the gallery. Vera, I see your hand up. Vera, you can go ahead.
I know the numbers, thank you. I know the numbers that has been going up quite rapidly, and there's a lot of people that are still not comfortable going in person. If there were such people who did not want to go in person and the board decide to have in person, is there an option where you can have the meeting where it can be both online, where people can listen in, as well as in person? If that is that a choice?
I think that's where our difficulty has been lying right now, is that SEAC, the facilities are not there for SEAC to go like sort of a hybrid model where there's some people online and some people in person. Just based on the logistics of it, there's really there's only one space in the board that really allows for that, and that's the sort of the trustees chambers, like the main area. But that's not really conducive to SEAC and that discussion around the table. It's very large and spread out, and so that really wouldn't work. I know, and I think that is a bit of the dilemma, right? Well, they're saying the numbers are plateauing. We don't really know what they are. We can only go by sort of hospitalization rates, et cetera. But, we have our kids in school, I guess, is, sort of the thing is like the kids are in school. They're, sort of the mandates on masking and stuff have been lifted. And not that I suggest that we don't wear masks at the SEAC meeting. It's just that is the problem. We don't have the capability right now to do a hybrid or to sort of even do that recording and live stream to YouTube as of yet. But that's sort of the discussion, because some of the stuff that we've been consulting on has been very important work, and to a certain degree, the engagement on that work does not seem, in a virtual format, just doesn't seem as robust. So I guess it's deciding where we want to focus.
Would we be able? Is it a possibility to do a survey to see how people if they're comfortable going into in person versus continuing online for an additional month, probably, to see what happened with the numbers? I'm just asking a lot of questions. I do apologize, but I think for me, I would like to know those questions, those answers.
Sure, fair enough. I think those are important discussions to have, which is why I thought we had to start this discussion at some point. So I think it's good to begin it and do a survey of the SEAC and see where the sort of majority stand, for sure. I see Jen has her hand raised, and so does Sensor Reneb. So we'll start with Jen because she was up first, and then move on to Sensor Reneb for the next comments. Go ahead, Jen.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to take my hand down back because Vera actually addressed the question that I was going to ask. So thank you.
No worries. Thank you. Go ahead, Sensor Reneb.
Hi, everyone. Everyone is being so polite and so professional in their questioning. So I'm just going to state what my personal opinion is, and this is my individual opinion. Everything is opening up, which means I was going from 99% at home to now I'm demanded outside everywhere, all at once, which makes the demands large. I already have some medical fragilities, so I'm kind of scared of people a little bit because I'm scared the numbers are going to go up again. I've talked about in the past the benefit of meeting in person. I feel like I've developed relationships with some people right here on this committee because of the in-person. And I'm not sure if I would be part of the committee without the in-person. I had a next point. In person, I get sick. I'm scared. I was wondering if there was ability to hold off till at least September so that we're keep discussing it and we're making a plan for our next school year.
Yeah, I mean that's fair enough too. I totally take all your points in that. Yeah, Vera, I see you also have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, I totally agree with the last comment. If we can do a survey and see, perhaps, I know the reason why we don't have proper data and status, and for some people who may have borderline or underlying medical issues, may not be able to attend, and some people anxiety is still very high. So to go back in May seems a little bit, anxiety probably might be even higher. So that's why I think it would be ideal if people kind of do a survey and allow people and have the numbers of people who want to go or want and see and make that decision, I think. But I do agree, perhaps thinking about extending it a little further than May. But that's my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you. No, it's very valuable. Donna?
I just wanted to make a comment that as far as board, yes, we're going in person for board, but all our committee meetings are basic, and it's really hybrid for board, but our committee meetings are virtual at this time. So, and that's the way it has been. I expect that unless something, who knows what happens in December, but I expect that September will be everything going back to, in person. But it definitely is an issue technology wise. Even in the board, you're absolutely right. That boardroom is huge. It's daunting. It's not conducive for really great conversations, to honestly tell you the truth. And even then, when we have it's a hybrid. I personally find it very difficult to hear people sometimes between whatever. So even if that room was made available, I don't think it would be conducive for our really good conversations that we have. So whatever the board, whatever the members on SEAC wish to do, we have, as far as the trustee is concerned, we're really here to listen and you guys to advise us. So whatever you wish to do is fine with us as trustees is concerned.
Okay, maybe what I will suggest is that I will put together sort of a little set of questions or whatever to ask, send around to circulate to the SEAC members to see what their thinking is, whether or not we wait. I just think we should start to develop a plan. So whether that's in May or that's September, at least we know, sort of have a plan on when we're going back in person. Because I think we've have a number of new members on our committee who we've yet to meet in person and make those connections with. And I think those are really huge for collaboration and discussions around the table. So maybe we could just do that and send out a sort of a, little set of questions to SEAC. What are your thoughts? Is your preference to maybe go back in May, or do you want to wait till September? And then go from there. Because I do take your point, we don't have all the information on what numbers are and vaccination rates are high, but everybody also reacts differently even to vaccinations. And I can definitely respect that. I know people as well who are pretty vulnerable. So maybe we'll leave it at that then, and we'll circulate, circulate that around to the SEAC members and get everybody's thoughts. We also have a number of members of SEAC who are not here tonight. So in fairness to them as well, to say, we need to start making a plan, and what are your thoughts? So, okay. Is that okay with everyone? Yeah. Okay. All right. And our second discussion for the open discussion period, Andrew, do you want to take that on, and then I'll sort of follow in on some of the thoughts?
Sure, I can lean into it and
sure.
Really just want to flip the conversation around the table to make sure that we're giving proper guidance to school teams around messaging to families. So we just wanted to loop back, first starting with a thank you to Tara for representing SEAC around the Ed Finance table in terms of the deputation. We did have a local news story pick up on the thread in terms of educational funding, and I've posted the link just in the chat box for you, and Lisa will include it in the minutes. Just in terms of our kids and advocating and the great job Tara did want to just clarify a couple points, because I think there's a couple of nuances just to clarify. So one was around assessments not being able to be available to grade 4. We do run a model where we are looking at children and youth needs right from start of school through, and that can take a number of forms, both in terms of even engagement and connecting with kids as information and data, through to more formalized assessments such as those that our speech paths do, and then the range of protocols that psych services do. So we do use grade 3-4 generally as a benchmark around the WISCs, just because there is that opportunity for program to meet student need and to look at it from an inclusive design and accommodation perspective first. As we get to know our students and be responsive to them, we certainly don't want to be applying a medical model where it's actually the programming that needs to adjust to meet kids' needs. So just unpacking that misnomer of grade 4 a little bit. But we do know too that sometimes as well, it's a conversation of what is needed, because again, our staff are providing services for educational access and understanding and supports. And so sometimes it's a request for an assessment, but that standardized assessment isn't what's felt to be needed when we get into, sorry about my throat, the conversation with families in terms of how we understand a student's gifts, talents, and areas of program need. So a range there. In terms of wait lists, we do see significant wait lists with some of our community partners programs, both in terms of the underfunding in other sectors and the wait lists there, as well as in the pandemic being hit with understaffing. We have been fortunate in special education in the Durham board that we have been at full staffing complement through the pandemic, and only recently in the last couple of months have begun to struggle in a couple areas such as social work supply and our children and youth workers, because that is a pilot project and we're not yet able to offer permanent employment. So a couple of times we have lost strong candidates as other organizations have been able to offer them permanent roles. So we'll work through that. But in terms of the wait list for assessments, typically once our clinicians are working with a family and do agree to take a look at an assessment, it is completed in with the school year in which it is committed to being facilitated. Again, I think part of the misnomer can be around what is needed, or sometimes, as Eva and I were chatting, how it's articulated at a school level. We have a lot of new teachers, a lot of new certs, a lot of a new admin, and sometimes those nuances of which service model and how long does it wait. For instance, Sarah will talk often about psych services, and our psych staff do 5 service prongs, whereas in some other boards, they only do psychometric assessments. Ours offer 5 service models. So each year, our psych services team members are to sit with school leaders and look at the needs of school community and build a plan for a year in terms of which service dimensions and how much, because they do take time And so it's always that balance point of in-class consultation, behavior support plans, assessments, which can include WISC, developmental assessments towards DSO application and things like that. So lots of nuances in terms of that. So I think Tara absolutely did a great job of representing SEAC and just pointing to some areas of concern. I just became concerned when the quote gets lifted into the media without the context of that wraparound and what else is part of that conversation. But I certainly do acknowledge that as a district, part of that messaging is with our staff at various levels in terms of how much time or the pressure. But really there needs to be, especially as we look at a human rights and equity centered perspective to serving our kids, we really need to look at why the standardized assessment is sought and what information it would yield, especially when we understand the bias that is within some of those normative sets that are being applied, and how that really does serve a more medical model of disability and engagement. And so really looking at, is it in the student's best interest, and is it needed in terms of understanding the programming needs and how the programming needs to be responsive to a student rather than the other way around, and student fitting programs. So again, I think it goes back to us learning and growing, and not being able to sit in a lot of really good conversations with school staff over the last couple of years. Certainly we see high pressures in terms of operational demands, and that certainly continues right now. So we're looking forward to a time where we can return to having those really robust conversations about the why behind, and unpacking some of those other layers, such as the prongs of service. But I think it's really important for staff on screen, including our administrators that have joined us from the two organizations, and certainly myself and the system leads, to really understand what you're hearing from parents and families, because that helps us shape our leadership and coaching back to both our ISS, like our department teams, as well as our school teams. So happy to take any feedback. Just wanted to kind of unpack those two pieces.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that's the crux of it, right? We had a bit of a discussion about it earlier, the article earlier today. And from my experience, the things that I heard from parents, and it's sort of been an ongoing problem, right? And you see it as a parent sitting on, as a parent and a representative sitting on SEAC. The sort of policy at the board level and the expectations and procedures, but that's not always what's relayed at the school level. And so some parents are getting some misinformation and there's misunderstanding, and sometimes there's outdated information being shared with parents, and therefore kids are missing sort of some of those target areas. And then there's the issue of sort of need, because as you say, our SEAC services department provide a variety of services. So the more that is kind of that push and pull, right? So the more you focus on one area, you have to kind of pull from another to do that. And so I think for some parents, the fear is that children who sort of those kids that might just fly under that radar, where they'd benefit from that assessment, that understanding, are flying just under the radar. And, there's some parents have the fortunate, the privilege to be able to afford those private assessments and things to catch some of those learning disabilities, and many do not. And also some may realize that there might be a learning disability or something underlying that. And some parents may also not realize that themselves. And those are the children who I worry the most about, because they're the ones who are not standing out in the crowd, in a sense, and the ones who often kind of get pushed on through, just kind of making it and getting more and more frustrated each year as they go through. And those are the kids I kind of really worry about. And so I think that was a lot of what Tara was putting out there in that presentation. Not so much that's the policy, but that's the message that the parents were getting. So I don't know if anybody else has any input that they want to put into that on sort of, what they hear in that respect within the community. Donna, your hand's up. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I know I was quoted in there too. So anyways, but, again, Andrea, I have said that I know for sure that our staff works extremely hard in trying to support our students. And you're being very, very polite because, I've sat around this table and I quite cleared out that the board has supported, the spec ed portfolio all the time, increasing that portfolio as far as the funds that are required to provide the service that you have. However, with, especially with COVID, as you mentioned, the strain on our community partners as well as yourself and staff, and it's just that it's gotten to the point where you're doing the best you can, but really we need the supports there when it comes around the funding. And I can remember back when I did my little guide, the percentage of, remember, is how much is really covered by spec ed funding. I don't know where he is these days. One of these days I'll pull it out, but I think it's gotten down to maybe a foot of that little guy. As far as how much is covered by spec ed funding. And so, as I mentioned, if you look at just the envelope, I did the preliminary calculations, the envelope for spec ed grants itself, it only increased about, now they've updated the numbers a bit, but it was only 1.2%. Well, considering the majority of our resources are personnel, staffing, 1% goes to, basically increases that have been agreed and contractually. So 0.2% is not a lot. And if you look at all the other increases there, it really is. And so, and our community partners, as you said, are strained as well. And so that's where I look where our community, our Smart Hub, particularly when it comes to the beginning, the start of school, is really critical that our partners work together. I'm glad that you made the comment about that you want the two-way communications with our communication as far as the Smart Hub is concerned, because that's really critical as well, because I think we can help each other. And just the communication to parents, because I also know staff work very, very hard, it's very, very difficult when I've had an increase, and I think I refer everything to you so you know what I'm talking about. I've had an increase of parents saying that we've had parents that have come from other boards, parents that have expectations. They're not getting what they want, or they've expressed their concerns, and then it isn't until something happens. And you're also dealing with increased incidents because of increased anxiety and so forth. So your capacity that you have to deal with is huge. So I appreciate you trying to say that you're doing all this, Andrea. I know you are, but we really are straining. And it's not only in Durham, it's across, I see it from a provincial level as well. I hear it from a provincial level. So it's really critical that we get a better understanding of where those issues are. And yes, they might be communication, but then they might not be as well. And so honestly, at this point in time, I honestly think we need to go back to what the issues are around, or maybe doing a survey again from SEAC. We haven't done one, and one of the comments was that we stopped it because we weren't getting anything out of it. It seemed like it was the same all the time. And I know people are surveyed out, but somewhere we've got to get that data input on from our parents, and what they see and what as far as some of the issues that they're running into. So that's just my feedback.
Go ahead, Andrea.
And again, not to dominate the mic. I apologize for that. I just think when we have members newer around the table too, just in terms of the context of the budget. So Donna's absolutely right. The Durham trustees have a longstanding history of support of special education programs and services above envelope. And we certainly try working with the trustees, working with our senior team that has a very inclusive mindset, and as well as an assumption of integration across departments, which is a beautiful and somewhat still uncommon stance. And then the leadership within the department that I can't speak highly enough about in terms of the breadth of expertise that the team brings. So we do have a commitment to try and get as high of a percentage of the dollars directly beside students in schools. So the special education and mental health budgets are set so that between 96 and 97% is direct staffing, either our teams sitting alongside students with mental health needs, our facilitators sitting coaching educators in inclusive programming, and then certainly all of the classroom staff that goes into supporting our kids on a daily basis. Another, approximately 4 million is in equipment for our kids and technology on an annual basis. And then we run quite thin on department overhead. We do have rightful responsibilities for professional development commitments of our staff. I think we've continued to grow in hiring excellent practitioners who are increasingly reflective of our student in terms of lived experiences in addition to their professional excellence. And we want them to stay at the top of their game and they're active for learning. So most of that little sliver that's left, we do turn into resources for kids, for staff in service of kids and professional learning. So that is a commitment I have with the portfolio and certainly share with the leaders around the table. We always say, how do we get the dollars to the kids? Because the best way to serve the kids is to actually put it right beside them in terms of staffing expertise and resources. So we do try and do that as much as possible. And I think that would be a success of Durham. It's just then if we look at needs of growth, then it's more of one is less of another in terms of that. Because I think we've got the budget pretty close to stripped in terms of those extra layers, and certainly always taking a look at that. But it is not, I just wanted to make sure that those around the table, new to the table, are rest assured that the dollars are sitting as close to the kids as we can get it. Always open for change and feedback. There's always things we can do differently, but we do try and be reflective of that on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, and I think, and also for the new members around, I don't know if you have had an opportunity to, or have seen the article or not, but one of the things that is quoted in the article kind of indicates, the board's support of special education and how important it is to the board, like the trustees and their support of it. 2018, 2019, and the 2019-2020 school year, they, over and above the envelope, the money provided for specifically for special education from the ministry, the board added $3 million to that. That jumped to $4.6 million in 2020 to 2021 school year, and then to $6.7 million in the 21-22 school year. So that's an indication of the direction of funding in relationship to the cost of providing the services that we provide. And I think that there's some concern there when you start to see the board having to annually, almost annually increase that, and significantly over the last couple of years. So that's something that we have to recognize and so that, like you said, there are only so many EAs that can be hired with the funding that's provided to the board. And I think that's where, when we were talking about budgeting that, Tara was trying to get across is that these things, these interventions are so, important to our kids that the more we can fight for that funding from the ministry level to be made to be brought up to more to what the true need is, the better our kids will be, and the better outcomes we all have at the end of the day, right? Because the more of our kids that succeed, the better we are as a society, right? So I think that's a lot of what that came down to.
I think so. And sorry, but I think that's where Donna, in pointing to, it's not just a Durham issue.
No, it's not just a Durham issue.
This is around how we support children, youth, and families when we bring learning and well-being together. Because I wouldn't want to get out of a conversation or end a conversation around budget and service without also bringing the pieces that there are essentially special education support dollars sitting in all of the other department budgets as well. We are not charged back for transportation for our special education classes. That's part of the transportation budget. We are not charged back for accommodations to learning spaces. Facility services builds that into the facility services budget. When I look at programs and supports, our curriculum team is now actively seeking consultation and looking at what are the inclusionary aspects and accommodation aspects within any board purchase resources. So it's not a matter of pulling from one and giving to the other, because in order to serve our kids well, all of the department budgets need to stay in that robust way, because it is, when we look at principles of universal design, district commitment to addressing ableism and inclusion, we want it to be the work of all departments, not just ours. And that is certainly, those are asks we don't make. They're asks and other service deliveries that come forward from the other teams in collaboration. So I think it's really important that a thriving system is thriving across all of the programs and services that are available to kids, that include those through inclusive student services, but are certainly not exclusive to.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to add anything to the conversation around this topic? Like I said, I know we all talk to parents in different ways. So, and you know, those voices are important for us to just have those discussions, right? Because sometimes it is a question too in a school level of messaging and making sure that we're starting to get that messaging across the board to be the same, right? Regardless of what school you're in, you know? No? Okay. Well, thank you. I think it was important to sort of have those clarifications and to make sure that, you know, we all understood where that messaging was coming from, or what what was behind that messaging. And you're right. We do know that every effort is made to ensure that dollars are spent on kids and that the services are provided. Okay, moving on then to the businesses arising from the minutes. It doesn't look like there's anything to be brought forward for today's meeting. The education finance deputation was done by Tara. Correspondence that was definition of disability was sent. So that's all that there is there that was sort of brought forward, but it's all been addressed so far. The association reports, we did receive the Voice for Deaf and Hard of Hearing April newsletter, and I will note that May is I think Speech and Language Month, or sorry,
Speech, Language, and Hearing Month. Speech,
Language, and Hearing Month, yeah. And there is I couldn't find the date for the Dress Out Loud. If there was a specific date, it just said Dress Out Loud Day, but there was nothing.
We'll find it and circulate it.
Yeah. Because I think it's important. Kathy's not here, unfortunately, to sort of add to that. So, but to just sort of bring awareness to that. Now, moving on to correspondence, we did receive a membership request from the Participation House Project Durham Region. And I just wanted to address a couple of things. I know this has come up in the past when we've had requests. From doing sort of a search online, there's a couple of things that sort of set up some questions for me. First, they offer some programs. Some of their programs are fee for service. And it is my understanding that we as a committee, and I'm not sure if that's a ministry as well, but that it cannot be a fee for service association on the board. And the other is that the main funding for them is from the ministry. So I'm not sure how that sort of interacts with the committee, given that the committee is sort of a committee mandated by the Ministry of Education to provide feedback to the school board on programming. If we're then bringing in an association that has direct links for funding to a government ministry, right? Whether that's a bit of a conflict on sitting on the committee. So thoughts around the table on that one. Donna, go ahead.
I think, didn't we recently, we actually told another organization that wanted to, because they have fee for service and so forth. And it would be different if it was now I can honestly say that community livings have fee for service programs as well, but they're an association, right? And so, I mean, this is interesting, but I in some ways I would say it would be great, but in other words, I'm going, no, they definitely have some fee for services, and it would be a conflict in what we are there. Most of what we have at our members that we have, our non-voting members, we call them, are partnerships. They actually have a partnership, and I don't believe we have a partnership with them at all. Right? No. So that would be an issue. So I don't feel they meet the criteria for a non-voting member because of their fee for services.
Because of the fee for service and the lack of pride. I don't think that we can have them as a voting member being a fee for service. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, we don't have a partnership with them. And while they may have some great perspectives, I think our concern, because I can't remember the name of the association that asked us to join previously, that was a fee for service, who does fantastic work with children with, sort of differing abilities. But, sort of the thought was, if we want to make sure we have no perception of money, sort of fees, sort of driving policy within a school board, right?
And preferences of services that is different with a partnership, but preferences of services, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm not sure if anybody else has anything they want to add to that. So Andrea's confirmed, as Nova's Arc. That's right. It was Nova's Arc that wanted a membership, and we had to decline because it was a fee for service. We recognize that Participation House is a nonprofit, but that fee for service is a bit of an issue, even if it's only on some of the programming. And then the other side is, is it really appropriate to have an association or sort of a group on the SEAC that is mainly funded from ministry money, which is another issue. So does anybody else have any thoughts on this? No? Okay. So, Donna, is this, do we vote on whether or not what we do with this? I'm throwing this back to you because you remember all these little details.
Yeah, because they have basically all memberships, even though we go through this process, is that they it really is. It does then go approved, but we as a board, we as a committee must recommend whether we recommend them or not recommend them. So we need a vote on whether we recommend them to become a member to the board of trustees or we don't recommend. So that's basically so in this case, yeah, you have to vote. You have to vote whether you recommend that they become a member. And then if we are saying no, then it's probably a good idea to either give them a call or
do we still have?
And then the other thing is that if we still have space, right? Because remember, you're only allowed so many members on the board on the thing as well, right?
We do have room at the table in terms of additional membership, and I believe, but would ask Lisa to do a second count. I believe with Donna and yourself, Eva, you're sitting at quorum.
Yeah, me. 2, 3.
But Jen and Carissa both carry a vote for same organization.
Right, so they're at one vote, right? So, Lisa, can you confirm whether or not we have quorum?
She's just working on it. I believe you're I believe you're one short.
I think we may need to defer this vote to the next meeting because we've had to have it. We've had a couple of members who've had to go a little bit early.
So basically, we've lost quorum. So you can't adjourn.
I can't.
No, I'm kidding.
We're here till next month, folks. Okay, so because we've lost quorum, we'll have to defer the vote on the letter from Participation House till next meeting. So if we want to just sort of re-add this letter to the next agenda, and then I guess we'll have a bit of the discussion ahead so that the people who are on next month will know what we're talking about. Okay. We also received a flyer from Grandview Kids with respect to a virtual open house on Wednesday, April 27th, that people can sort of just go online and I guess probably right on the Grandview website and register if they want to attend that virtual groundbreaking. And then, of course, we received correspondence from the York Catholic Board regarding the SIP funding and another one regarding the nursing shortage. So the SIP funding is sort of echoing our letter with respect to the true cost of providing that second full-time staff member. Okay. Then we can move on to community concerns. Do we have anything to bring up does anybody have any community concerns that they wish to bring up at the moment? No? Okay. Moving on then to celebrations and successes. Does anybody have anything they want to share? No? Okay. Our next SEAC meeting is May 19th, 2022, and it will be online. And most likely, I think that without quorum and without the other members here, we should be at least looking at May online. And then we'll send around sort of a survey to all of the SEAC members to see sort of moving forward where we're going to go. Okay. I guess we can't really make a motion to adjourn. We can make a motion to adjourn. Go ahead, Donna.
You can still make a motion to adjourn. And in fact, if the business of an agenda is concluded, the chair can call an adjournment without even making a motion.
Well, I guess the business is taken care of, so I'm going to call an adjournment then.
That's exactly it.
Exercise my
power.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you all, everybody. Have a great night.
Good night.
See you later.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.